Hi everyone. Today I am doing a review for the Prismacolor Premier chisel tip and fine tip markers. There is a difference. There is a chisel tip version and then a brush tip version, and I think both of them have the fine tip for the other side of the markers. They're dual-ended. Before I get started, just a couple notes, as I always note with product reviews, just basically my disclaimers. First off, up to this point and moving forward, all of these products have been purchased by me. I haven't received these from any companies for review. I try to be as honest as I can with these, and my reviews tend to be a little bit longer, but I try to compare them as much as I can to similar brands if I have them, and in the case of the actual coloring supplies, testing them out in a variety of coloring books. And the other part being that if it's an Amazon link in the description, I am an Amazon affiliate. If you click through that link and purchase something on Amazon, I just get a few cents as a referral bonus. It doesn't change the price or anything like that. The funds I use from that usually go back, no, they've been going back into coloring supplies and books for this channel and for use by me. Trust me, anything that anybody wants me to get, I'm going to want it myself before I go get it. So just so y'all know. Anyway, that's a whole lot faster than my normal disclaimers. Mostly just because I can't remember the rest of them and I'm too lazy to print out a big long sheet. So let's just move on. So these are the Prismacolor Premier Markers. Oh, you can see them pretty well from there. So they are dual-ended. You have, in this case, these are the broad tip or chisel tips on one end. Look like that. And then your other side, you have a little fine tip or bullet tip. It's a round barrel marker. I would say the size of the barrel is typical of alcohol-based markers. I don't really see anything significantly different about that. At the ends of the markers, they do have a color, but they also have a number, usually PM, which of course would be Prismacolor 1 to what have you. And then also on the barrel, they do have, of course, the Prismacolor Premier on it, but then they also have the name of the color, which is processed red. Here you go. And then it also gives the number there. Something I just thought about trying to test, which I'll do so in a minute. It's going to require some fumbling because I'll need my Prismacolor pencils. But so looking at this in comparison to these Blick Studio markers, the caps, actually I meant to mention the caps on these do have one little section that kind of juts out from the rest. So I guess that keeps your markers from rolling. So in comparison to the Blick Studio markers, they seem to be just a little bit longer, though I'm going to take the ends off here in a minute to actually see if it's legit or it's just the caps. I think it's just the caps. Very similar in the barrel, same format. The difference being Blick Studio on the end simply just has a color and does not have a color name. But on the barrel, they do have a color name. They do not have a color number. And this is also a broad or chisel tip. So let me get the caps off so we can see. I would say in my experience, Blick Studio markers tend to me to be the closest in comparison to the Prismacolors. At least in my limited experience so far. Yep. Well, would help if I put the same tips on the same sides, huh? So if you look at it here, the barrels are lengthwise essentially the same as far as the size of the markers. This is interesting. I didn't notice this. So the Prismacolor one has kind of a rounded chisel, if that makes any sense. And it does have a little like indentation here. And it seems rounder, broader, if you will. The Blick Studios are more of just a straight broad tip. There's no bigger width to them. They are smaller in size on the broad tip than the Prismacolors. On the bullet tip end, they look identical. So, whoops. Let me put the caps back on my Blick one. Now, in comparison to a Copic sketch, take the ends off. I also have the chisel tip in the Copic sketch. Sensing a pattern here, aren't we? The barrel is longer in the Prismacolor. Now this does have a chisel and a brush tip, the Copic sketch, so we can't obviously look at the bullet tip end. The chisel tip is kind of the same thing. The Copic sketch has a chisel tip more similar to the Blick, where it goes straight down on the sides like that. You can see it's very straight. Thus, come on, Michelle. With Prismacolor, as you can see, it's more of a broad, rounded type tip, which I guess would make a bigger difference if you're trying to cover larger areas. The barrels, this is more of an oval shaped barrel with the Copic sketch, as opposed to the round barrel. The Copic sketch does have the color name and number on the cap. Now, as far as refills, the Blick Studios can be refilled, or you can purchase refills. Let me put it this way. You can purchase refills for the Blick Studio markers, so you don't have to purchase a new marker every time. You can purchase refills for your Copic sketch, for your Blick Studio. I can't remember. I think I just repeated myself. As far as I know, you cannot buy refills for the Prismacolor markers. So when you run out of this marker, you're just going to have to go purchase a whole new marker in of itself. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit because I'm an idiot and I didn't pull that info up. I am real prepared for this, aren't I? So that is one pretty big disadvantage for the Prismacolor Premiers, as I would consider these a higher level type of marker. So here is the color chart that I have. I purchased a 72 set off of Amazon. It was the chisel tip and the bullet tip. The purchase price I paid in August was about $102. It currently, the same set is selling for around $120 US. I don't have the packaging that comes with it because I tossed all those trays, but it comes with these little plastic trays that you can actually set them up on your desk and pull from that tray. So it's really handy to have, and in retrospect, I probably should have held on to them, but oh well, I can't show you the packaging on it. So for the colors that are there in the 72 set that I purchased and the one I'm going to link to, these are the colors. I just put their numbers instead of their names because I was lazy. And while I'm talking about this, I'm going to go ahead and see if I can pull out what I'm looking for here. Well, while I'm talking. So one thing I notice about the Prisma markers is they are indeed very vibrant. They're very bright. Okay, well, I'll get to it here in a minute. They're very vibrant and bright, and just a glance at this, at the 72 set, you do get a nice number of grays, which is fortunate for me, and I'll explain why in a minute. I will be talking some about Blick Studios in this simply just because, like I said, to me, there's such a similar comparison that those are the markers that I kind of want to compare against, because to me they seem kind of not quite neck and neck in the competition, but they're very similar markers in that respect. So in this 72 set, you get a very large number of grays. You get, of course, a black. You get a good number of browns. That was one thing that has really drawn me to the Prisma markers. In that 72 set, you get a very nice number and variety of browns. So if you enjoy coloring a lot of nature, you don't get quite as many greens as you would in a normal set, but I think the browns kind of make up for that. So still though, if you're really into coloring nature and things like that, having this many browns might appeal to you. As far as yellows and oranges, you get a very nice number of those, a fair amount of pinks and reds. You don't get very many purples, a fair number of blues, and an okay number of greens, but you don't get quite as many as I would think you would get in a set like this. So for people that like to color nature, they're going to kind of lose a little bit in the greens, but they would gain it in the browns in this particular set. Now, these are open stock and you can buy them individually, and I will be telling you about what price they are individually once I pull that up. One other thing I wanted to note, so if you're not a fan of the chisel tips and you prefer the brush tip markers, they do have a brush tip and fine tip version of the Prisma markers. For comparison purposes, the chisel tip 72 set is currently being sold for $119.90. The brush tip version is being sold for $202. So you're talking about an 80%, Jesus, $80 price difference between the chisel tip and the brush tip. So if you have your heart set on the brush tips, you might want to just purchase them maybe open stock or something and build your own set from there, because it's going to be awful costly to purchase them in sets like this. Now, if you don't mind using chisel tip markers, this might be appealing. It's only, I paid $100 for them, so they're not that far off from what they were when I paid, and I got lucky and hit a low price on that. So not a bad deal in my opinion. So I'll talk more about that at the end. One thing I wanted to do while we were here is look at my orange and then go back and find my orange. You're like, what is she doing? What is she doing? She has lost her mind. Yep, lost my mind completely. Well, I'm going to get it one of these days, guys. There it is. So one thing I was curious about just now that I haven't tested yet is how close the marker is necessarily to the pencil. So orange on here is number 16, which is right here. I have an orange Prismacolor pencil. So let's shade in above it and just see. They look to be pretty spot on. I'm obviously not going to do that for every single color in here, so I can't sit here and tell you with absolute, certainty that all the colors are going to match. But I would theorize that if you are really familiar with your Prismacolor pencils, the markers will be an easy transition for you, as the colors will be similar. One other thing I want to show before we get to the demo part. Actually, let me do one thing. Wait, music. That's not the right keyboard. So prepared. So prepared. I will be posting all this information I'm talking about in the description. Whoa, that's not right. Chisel marker, let's say orange. I'm trying to find the individual prices of the individual markers, but I am having trouble doing so on Amazon. My suggestion would be to use a site like Dick Blick or Jerry's Artarama. Artarama. I think that's right. As you will more than likely find all the individual colors open stock on those types of sites. That's not the right one. That's brush marker. Boy, they're just all set to make a liar out of me today, let me tell you. There we go. I, okay. So the individual colors sell for $3.69 on Dick Blick currently. So if you want to build like your own little set, that might be more cost effective than buying a just entire set like this. So they are sold open stock, which is really nice because, you know, if you run out of one of these markers, then you can obviously go buy another one. I think when I went to Hobby Lobby, at Hobby Lobby, they were like $6 or $7 a piece. It was really high, and there was no way I was buying more markers there. I was going to buy those online instead, but I didn't have a coupon or anything. So one thing I will note, just as a comparison, this is the Blick Studio markers. Now, I did something a little different with those. This isn't a set in of itself. I had purchased a small set to try out. I liked them so much that when I went to look at their sets, they were very cost prohibitive on Dick Blick. So what I did was I ended up ordering all the colors individually. This sounds insane now that I'm saying this. I ordered all the individual open stock colors that I didn't have, and then I also didn't get all of the different grays because, see, I have a number of grays in my Prismacolor set. I have a number of grays in my Cali Arts and my Shuttle Arts. I have plenty of grays. Copic, I have plenty of grays to choose from, so I didn't really need to purchase those. And all in all, with the percentage off that I was getting around Christmas, it was at least like $40 cheaper to get these like this rather than the entire set. So this is pretty much their entire color library that they have. I would say the Prisma markers are going to have a whole lot more color options than the Blicks. So keep that in mind. The Blicks are, you can purchase refills for those. And what is their open? I'll look at their open stock stuff in a minute. But when you look at the color differences, the Blick Studios do have some vibrant colors, but one thing I really noticed is that the Blick Studio markers are very strong in neutrals. So if you need a lot of light colors for, say, skin tones or stonework or beaches or any sort of thing where you might need more neutral colors to choose from, that's where your Blick Studios are going to come into play. I think these together are really handy to have. To me, having both sets gives me a really good color library to choose from. I said for a long time I thought the Blick Studios were better than the Prismas just because of refills, but I'm kind of changing my mind on that because I think they work very well just together. But I would say, so if you want a wide color palette to choose from and you don't want to drop a whole bunch of money on big Prisma marker sets, then I would suggest open stock either through the Prisma markers to build your own palette or add some Blick Studios to them as well. All right, now that we have gotten all of that out of the way, it was not extremely informative, I'm sure, but actually, let me look at one more thing. Y'all are like, oh my God, you're not prepared. I am not prepared at all. Okay. So, I am on dickblick.com and I'm looking at the individual markers. All right. So, the Blick Studio markers I have are the chisel tips. Their individual colors are $3.32. So they are slightly cheaper per marker than the Prismacolor. And then you can also purchase refills with them. So keep that in mind just as a comparison between the two. And that's just on Dick Blick's site. There could be a number of other different price ranges. I would suggest using a site like that or an art supply store to purchase open stock individually, because I think it's going to, unless they're really well used, well unless they're really common colors, I think you're going to have trouble finding them on Amazon. If you do, they're going to be like some crazy, crazy price. So, all right, now that we've said all that, let's get to the demo part. We are going to go into first animal mandalas. Before we get there, I realized I haven't colored a lot of pictures using just my Prismacolors, which seems crazy now because of how much I love them. But they tend to work well in with other sets, thus that's why they usually get used together with like the Blake Studios and stuff. So this picture I did last month, right towards the end, this was my only Feline February color and chat, and this was colored entirely using Prismacolor markers. To me, they seem very smooth. You don't get as much streaking with them usually. This is Create Space paper too, by the way. You don't get as much streaking with them. They seem to lay down a smooth amount of color where I don't have to go over them multiple times, at least on this type of paper. So that is an example of a full picture completed with them. So now let's run through some different demos. This is Animal Mandalas by Jade Summer. It is on Create Space paper or Amazon printed paper. Gosh, that's I'm never going to get used to that, ever. We have a program we used at work that went through a name change about 5 years ago, and we all still call it what it was originally called. It's really hard to do name changes like that. All right, so we have our little kitties here. We are going to, what are we going to do? Yep, that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to color the kitties orange. I'm not too worried about the spots. I'm just going to come back and put a brown over those. We're going to try to do a blend on those, and then for the flowers I'm just going to do a straight color. So for the straight color we are using Processed Red, which always really throws me off because it looks way more like a pink than it does a red, which, you know, of course it says red. I'm like, what the heck? Okay, there we go. So we're using Processed Red, and I'm just going to straight color these flowers. These are very juicy markers, so if you are using them on paper that soaks up markers like Amazon printed paper, I would suggest having a very light touch with your markers. Maybe not quite going all the way up to the edge because it will fill it in for you. See, now I'm trying to be cautious and it's getting all streaky. It's not how I normally color. I normally just deal with the bleed. So there's that. We'll probably just do the one flower. I've seen people have luck just lifting up on the marker as they're coloring on the paper. I try to do that, especially when I'm in small areas or I'm around the edges like this. Then the rest of the time I just put the marker on the paper and just go. This is a toothy paper. It is going to soak up your marker very quickly. If you do not like, no matter how much a marker tries not to streak on you, if you color a section, let it dry quick enough, and then try to go back over it, you're going to get a streak. So I'm not going to say these are completely streak proof. A lot of that has to do with the paper you're using. So let's test that. We're just going to leave that there. Let it give it a second to dry. See, around the edges I'm able to lift up, but I just can't do that for the whole picture. So there's that. Blowing on a little bit, try to dry it. These markers will dry very quickly on this type of paper. So much that you should probably work in small sections when you're coloring. Like the size of these flower petals are pretty are a pretty good size. And as you notice, usually when I color, I'm working from one section and just working outward. And going to do one more petal, and then we're going to leave it for a minute. Let it dry and come back, because this side, it is very slightly noticeable. I don't know if you can see it on camera. I can see it, but that's only because I am looking for it, I guess. Okay, so we're going to color the kitties. I'm going to use the chisel tip side. We're going to do, this is what we're going to do. We're going to attempt a blend. Now, why do I say attempt? Because on Amazon printed paper, again, you're going to get, it's going to dry very quickly. So you're going to have to work quickly and probably do multiple layers in order to get a blend on paper like this. It's possible. It's going to use up a lot of your ink, and since these aren't refillable and you have to buy the markers individually, that may not be worth it to you. Plus, the toothier paper may be a little rougher on the nibs of your markers. I will say, I think the broader tip does allow for covering a wider space, so you can definitely fill up a page quickly using it. I wouldn't put too much stock in how I'm doing this, because I'm lazy and I don't use my chisel tip ends as much as I should. We're going to do one layer of each color. And I'm moving as quick, I'm trying to move pretty quickly between colors so that we can see what it does just on the get-go. Now you're starting to see a little bit of bleeding onto the paper. Because I'm not lifting on the ends. And these are very juicy markers. As you can see, I'm having no problem with pilling or damage to the paper. These are just smooth as silk on even just paper that you sometimes have to fight with. It even works well. So that was the initial layer, and I had 3 different colors, and you can definitely see there's not really a blend between them, but you can see the 3 distinct colors. Now, if this looks a little dark to you, that's just because the black of the paper behind it is showing through. As it dries on a lighter color, you won't notice that as much. Now you're like, what about that blend mess you were talking about? Well, if you put 1 layer of marker, or what was it? Oh, no, that was something different. Never mind. Boy, that was helpful. Put 1 layer down, let it dry. When you put the next layer down, you're going to have a little bit more drying time, because that layer underneath is already there and it's already soaked into the paper a little bit, so you have a little more time to play when you start your second layer of marker. And so we're going to do that. I would not recommend doing this frequently if you want to keep your markers in good shape, because this will certainly, not only will you have trouble with the bleeding out like it is because you're saturating the paper so much, but you are going to run through the ink in your markers very quickly doing this. So we are going to think this was pale vermilion. We have orange, pale vermilion, and then a Spanish orange. You can blend, but it takes a lot of work, and you still may not get the results you would get on better quality paper. So, as you can see, it's continuing to bleed. So, fortunately, I have this on PDF, so I don't have to worry about if I didn't exactly wreck this or anything. All right, let me put the caps back on while we're waiting a second. It still is a little obvious between the orange, Spanish orange, and the vermilion. But as you can see, there is a little bit better line and transition between the other two colors. If I were to go back over the edges here, I could probably get it even more blended, but we're going to leave it because I don't want to use up my markers on another layer on that. Alright, so let's go back to this petal and go ahead and fill this in. We know that's dried completely, and let's see if it leaves a line. Now, I'm using the fine tip side for this. Me personally, I prefer the fine tip side on a good juicy marker, especially for smaller detail areas like this. Plus, I feel like I have a little more control with it. And sometimes it's more relaxing to me and less stressful than, especially on this type of paper, than running the risk of a lot of bleed through. Like, see there, as I'm putting in more and more layers, you're getting more and more of the ink soaking in. So it takes some real practice to be able to create a good blend on this paper that doesn't bleed out past the lines. I've done it, it just, like I said, it's going to take a lot of work. Alright, we are going to put this aside for a moment and move on to our next book. Maybe. So that was a Amazon printed paper version. We're going to show something a little different today and show a Zendoodle coloring book, which I don't know if I've done a lot of reviews with or not, but I started this color by number this morning, and it is called Spring Awakening. It's by Deborah Muller. I started this color by number this morning using my markers, and I noticed something interesting. Oh, actually, let me bring that back over. Do I have any leaves? I did have leaves there. All right, let me bring that back over for a minute. That'll give us a chance to, I think it's dry, but just in case it's not. I'm going to take my Blick Studio marker and I'm going to color in some of the leaves, maybe, possibly. This, let's use Spring Green in both. So this is Spring Green with the Blick Studio. I'm going to use fine tip. As you can see, it to me performs very similar to the Prismacolor markers. There's a dog barking outside. I apologize if you can hear it. Alright. Now we are going to do Spring Green in the Prismacolor marker. Very small spot. It's not super obvious right now, but on some of the other pages I think it will be. So I'm not really comparing them color to color because, I mean, that goes with any marker set. Just because it says spring green in one set and spring green in another does not mean they are going to be the same color. So I'm not really comparing that. I'm just showing that to me they perform very similarly. There we go. Yes. And as you can see, we did get a very obvious line through there. So to me, that's not the fault of the marker. Actually, right here, you can't even tell where I waited a little bit for it to dry a little. So you have more time with these markers than you would, say, like your crayons or your rose arts. But I think that comes down to the juiciness of the marker. The more ink the marker has and the more the paper soaking up, less likely you're going to get those streaks. And because these types of alcohol markers have a lot more ink in them, I think that's why you're getting a little less likelihood to streak. So there is that. This is pretty much completely dry. You do notice we got a little bit better of a blend. So yay. Okay. I think we're good there. This is the picture I've been working on this morning. I noticed something interesting with this paper, and that was the reason why I wanted... Oh no. Sorry guys, hang on. I could stop the video, but then that would require me having to use my software. Just juggling cats. Back in a moment. Lord. Here, in the bed. There you go. Good job. I was like, dude, this is the worst time you could be doing that. Okay. So I'm not going to be doing any blending on this since I'm actually working on this page, but something I wanted to show that I thought was interesting. I'm using the Blick Studio markers on the leaves, and the thing I noticed is that they seem a little streakier on this type of paper. Now, I don't know what type of paper it is, but it's surprising to me. This is actually the first time I've come across any paper that seems to have trouble with these types of markers. So I was curious about that. All of the leaves, well, while I'm yapping, running my mouth, let's just go ahead and continue here. And I'll hopefully show y'all what I mean if I can zoom in any closer. I can zoom in using the camera. There we go. All right. So this is the Blick Studio marker. This is not super smooth paper. It's definitely smoother than the Amazon printed paper, but if you look, what's interesting is it's almost like it's pushing the ink around on the surface, and you're not really getting a smooth, consistent color. Finding myself almost having to go back over it just to make sure I get a fairly smooth color. I don't believe I've tried these markers before in my Zen Doodle books, so this is interesting. There is that. And see that one, we're just going to leave that one as is. Now I'll do one more. This is why I do such a long demo session on my reviews, is because I find surprises in the books that I try out. And this was one of them. So those were the Blick Studios. They seem to dry okay. I mean, they're not super streaky when they dry. It's just really odd to me that that's even a problem laying them down. So, well, that lasted a while. Cat got up here, got in the bed for... Oh, goodness. What are you doing? Oh, goodness. Anyway, hopefully a cat fight doesn't erupt. Probably will, knowing my luck. So the colors are orange and magenta, and then in the middle it's raspberry. I know those seem like it's a really odd color combo, but that's why I grabbed the red and the orange, because that's what I happen to have. Now see, I'm not having as much a problem with the Prismacolor markers, but it is happening. I'm still getting that kind of streakiness about it. Let's try the chisel tip side and see what happens. Yeah, it feels like it's even worse on this side. It's not laying down consistent. It's something about the surface of this paper. If you really like coloring in Zendoodle books, these types of alcohol markers may not be the best choice. I can't recommend any because I haven't really tried any markers up to this point. But yeah, you can see that's really odd. It's a rare paper I find that doesn't play well with alcohol markers. There's ones that play better than others, but it's rare to find paper where they don't perform well. So we're going to do this petal and then switch over to the red. Now the Prismacolors do seem to do a little better on this. So you still have a tendency for that streakiness to happen. So keep that in mind. Which one was it? Process Red was the one I was using for my magenta. I figured I'd show you both colors. One being a darker color, it'd be easier to see any streakiness, which is what I think is happening with that darker Blick green. I'm seeing it more than I did on the yellow-green color. And see, in this small an area, unless it's a really big petal like this, and because of the streakiness, I probably won't use my chisel tip. Sides on this paper. I'm still going to continue to use the markers. I don't think it's enough to just say I'm not going to use them on here. I am curious though, and eventually we'll look and see how other types of markers test on this paper, since I have found an anomaly is the way I kind of look at it. So odd color combo, but it kind of works too, you know. All right, so that was the Zendoodle book. I am not going to close it. I'll set it somewhere to dry. And then to grab another more familiar type of book, we do have the Butterfly Mandalas by Joe Taylor. Probably would help if I backed up the screen a little. There you go. Butterfly Mandalas by Joe Taylor. I think it's this very first one. Yes. That's the one I had. Put my page behind it. So let's go with, let's try our blend again. Maybe. Goodness. There we go. I usually try to go from dark to light just because I like to buck the system. No, I don't know. Dark to light's always been way more comfortable for me. So let me zoom back in. Boy, aren't y'all having fun? Well, hopefully I haven't sounded like I'm in a hole this whole thing. I just realized that my software, again, in its infinite wisdom, randomly decided to switch me to the webcam microphone. So I've been sitting here talking into a microphone that's not even on. I don't know if it's making me feel better about myself. I don't know. So Creative Haven paper, I would put kind of in your mid-range paper. They're a pretty popular series of books, which is one of the reasons why I try to always include one. I am doing another layer, but as you notice, it's not bleeding as much as the Amazon printed paper. Going over it a little bit. Now, I'm starting to get a little bit of a bleed just because I'm going over it so much. So, oh, goodness. Okay. So, let's just do the rest in orange. And that'll just look like a really odd petal. Again, you have to sit there and think of, you know, how small a space are you trying to blend? How many times you're going to have to put layers down? Are you going to start getting it bleeding out like that? A little Posca pen can fix that. I'm not as worried about it, but I wouldn't want to have to do that for every one of these petals. I'm still in the thing. You're not getting a fantastic blend either with them. It's basically comes down to, I've heard you can't blend on anything but marker paper. You can, but you're not going to get optimal results, I guess. Let's just put it that way. Smoother the paper and the less time it dries, or the longer it dries, the more, that's complete opposite. The longer it dries, the more opportunity you have to blend. That may look a little darker than the rest of them, but that's fine. I'm not really lifting on the edges of this, and if you notice, it's not bleeding outside the lines, though I'm still getting plenty of color to put down. I'm not worried about going into the center. I think I'm going to use a brown there as well, so. Alright, there are the oranges, if I can keep up with my caps. And not put the wrong caps on the wrong markers. Not that I haven't done that. Not that I've done that before. Cough, cough. That gets really confusing, let me tell you. Alright, so here we are going to do the different spring greens again. So I'm going to use the Prismacolor spring green here on these leaves. There's that. And then the Blick Studio spring green. I do feel like the Prismacolors are slightly smoother laying down than the Blick Studios. Now, you're still getting smooth coverage with the Blick Studio. I think they are neck and neck in that regard, but in putting it down on the paper, and I haven't used either of these markers very much, it's not like an inconsistency just because I've used one marker more than I've used the other. I'm not really, this seems to take a little more effort to lay down than the Prisma one. It came off the marker really easily. Looking here, you're getting a little bit of bleed through here with the Blick. Getting a tiny bit of bleed through with the Prisma, though it went down smoother and there's not as much bleed over on the individual petals. So yeah, that seems very odd to me, but there is that. And finally, as I said, Generally, you need marker paper to get some good marker blends. So we're going with Cats, Kittens, and Wildcats by Color It. This is about as good of a paper as you can get. I think I lost my picture. I did. I did. I figured it was in this vicinity. Might not be. I might have went too far. Nope. There it is. All right. Grab that. Maybe. There is that. Always, especially with markers, put a blotter page behind what page you're doing. If it is double-sided, if it is single-sided, it could be on marker paper. It is still going to want to bleed through. So just keep that in mind. Let me check some real quick. Yeah, that's what I figured. Okay. So we are going to try, if I get the caps off the markers. The caps are not super easy coming off the markers. And depending on whether you've used them or not, they can be extremely difficult and obnoxious, like they're trying to be right now. All right. So we're going to try our dark to light blend right here. Not too bad, going over the surface of the paper. And then to the lightest. So with one layer you get fairly decent blending, but let's go in for another round as we have the others. Don't even think it, Cat. Never fails. Only when I am focused on something. Seems to be the moment they all need something. Attention, food. Their goal in life is to distract me. Well, we're pretty close to being done, so trust me, they get plenty of attention. They got played with this morning. They got treats. Sometimes they get more food. They probably get more food than they need. So there we go with our second layer. I might go over it all with the lightest color, just to get some consistency. So there, got a very nice blend with just the two layers. I didn't even need to do that part. I just did that to, ow, jeez. Caps can be a little difficult to put on, so make sure that you press down. Like, just take, a lot of times I just take the marker and I just do that just to make sure. I think I put the wrong cap on the wrong one, but that's okay. I'll fix that. So with our leaves, we are going to do, let's pick some of the, what am I doing here? we're going to do individual Prismacolors. So I'm just going straight color on the leaves using spring green and grass green. Lays down very easily. This is extremely smooth paper. You would probably have more trouble, you'd have to use a way softer colored pencil for this type of paper. I know, I didn't go back and forth like I meant to. I completely messed that up, but that's fine. No mistakes. There's no mistakes in coloring. Well, maybe not, but yeah, see, I can't believe that one either. Alright, so you saw how smooth that went. These work fantastic on this paper. As much ink as we put on that blend, and there's not a bit of bleed over the lines. That's part of the leaf. I was like, is that part of the leaf? Is that part of the... I did that again. Oh well, it's fine. I believe that is part of the flower, so we're not going to color that. I might actually work on this one off camera. Never fails. This is why I don't have consistent test pictures. I'll start one testing stuff, and then I'll be like, you know, I really like this color combination. I think I'm going to actually work on this page. So there is that. Now let me... Other one. There we go. We're going to use the spring green Blick on the stems. These work great on this paper too. I would say there's no discernible difference there. You get a good pop. Goodness. Pow! Come on, Michelle. You get a good pop of color with both brands. And you get some slight color variations if you combine the two. Like, that's pretty close to the spring green, but it is just a hair shade off, so you do get at least more color variety, especially if you bring the two together. All right, so what did we learn today in the middle of all this mad coloring book madness? We learned that Michelle is never prepared, but along with that, kind of my final thoughts on these markers, not those. My final thoughts on these. Let me back out a little. Nope, that's as backed out as it's going to get. So, Prismacolor markers. I love Prismacolor markers. I mean, I have Copics. Everybody loves Copics. I struggle with using a brush tip, so a chisel tip is friendlier to me. I obviously still don't use it a whole lot, but when I do for the bigger spaces, I feel more comfortable using a chisel tip to get in the small spaces than I do a brush tip. If you're that type of person, the Prismacolor chisel tips might be a good choice for you. I love their color variation. I would say pros are the number of colors you have to choose from. You can get a set like this and then build on that through open stock, or you could buy bigger sets like that. They have a lot more color variety in them than, say, the Blick Studios, which I feel like are the closest in comparison. Wide color variety. They're easily found most places too. You find them on Amazon, you can find them on Dick Blick, you can find them in a bunch of different places. They are, as I said, open stock, so you can buy the individual markers and build your own set if the cost of them is a little too high for you. My art teacher told me that one of the things that makes Prismacolor markers unique is that they use the same inkwell. And I haven't been able to find the information verifying that, but what that means is you're going to get consistent color from both ends. So whether that is the case with Prismacolor and whether the other markers like the Blick Studios do that, I do not know. Like I said, I mentioned that just in case somebody happens to come across that info, but I'm not going to sit here and say without a doubt that it's the only marker that does that. So let's see, the color lays down really smooth, especially on marker paper. It blends beautifully. On any paper, the Prismacolor seems to lay down very well. You don't have to really work at it to get a lot of color. It goes down smooth. I seem to have less problems streaking with these than I would say like my Sharpies or my Shuttle Arts or some of my more budget-friendly markers. I tend to have less trouble streaking with these. Some of the downsides, the price of the sets, it can be cost prohibitive if you don't find them on sale. There's an $80 price difference between the brush tip markers and the chisel tip markers. That's ridiculous. That shouldn't be $80. The only reason there's an $80 difference is because a lot of people tend to prefer brush tip over chisel tip. It's the only reason there's an $80 difference there. Has nothing, I doubt there's $80 worth of product difference in those sets of markers, and I would be very surprised if that was the case. So the sets can be prohibitive. I would recommend buying them open stock, though I would recommend a place other than Amazon, Dick Blick perhaps, or Jerry's Artarama, whatever. I would suggest a site like that for the open stock versions. You cannot purchase refills for these markers. Once they run out, you will have to purchase another entire marker. The cost at an actual store could be higher, $6, $7 a marker, at least in my experience, but online you can find them cheaper. You can even buy them in like packs or 5 or 6 and save even more with them. So that is a big downside to them. Trying to think. Really, that's honestly, to me, that's the cost and the fact that you have to replace the entire marker are probably the two biggest cons for me. And at first, I thought the Blick Studios would be a clear winner over these just because you can get refills for them. But to be honest, I love using them both. I can't see using these any less just because they don't come with refills. Because I get a lot more colors I can choose from with these versus what I had to choose from for Blick Studio. I have a lot of places I can shop for these markers. The Blick Studios are pretty much a Dick Blick and nowhere else. The Blick Studios are a little cheaper, but I don't look at them now as competitive. I look at them as a good pairing. You get more color variety between the two sets, especially if you do like I do, and if you can come up with a percentage discount or get something on sale buying it open stock, then maybe you can build your own set open stock. The price wise, if the price works, I suppose. But I love these markers. I mean, they're not Copics, but nothing else in this world is. But honestly, I feel like these can, if you get the Copic chisel tips, honestly, I feel like these would give them a run for their money. I really do. The refill thing is the only thing that kills it. And I tell you, if Prismacolor, if you ever watch this, y'all come out with refills for your markers, that would be a game changer for you. It really would, in my opinion. That right there would make everything else worth it, especially because of the higher cost. I would gladly pay the higher cost of the markers if I could get refills for them. Anyway, guys, hope you got something out of this chaos. I'm going to put the marker sets and any of the info I mentioned down in the description. And I'll link to some other sites other than Amazon as well, because like I said, I wouldn't recommend buying open stock stuff on Amazon. That's kind of a shot in the dark on what kind of price you're getting. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I will try to answer them. Thanks, and bye for now.